the autopilot? What's it doing? Mayday! Mayday! Mayday!
One of the things that attracted me to the script, the first episode, was it had this fantastic plane crash sequence. The way that Ben had written it was played just as much off the passengers as it was off the pilots who were wrestling with this machine as it was going down.
Visualising the plane crash has always been quite tricky. You can throw a lot of money and have a lot of effects and all these things, but in the end, you know, it's the drama that sells it.
I think there are two ways the plane was really important. The first way is that it felt like a new way of integrating that idea of the midpoint and the border into the action of the story, but also the debris of a plane crash being full of stories.
Who is on the plane? What's in that suitcase? What does that tell us? So it gives you plot way beyond the actual crash itself.
There were three elements that we used to try and make the sequence be as gripping and thrilling and also believable as it possibly could be. The first was that we got a real plane on the tarmac. Having a real plane and being able to shoot from inside the cockpit down to the tarmac and do the reverse solidified the idea in the audience's mind that we are using a plane.
We went to a real plane in Stansted and we filmed passengers get on and we filmed the pilots talking to each other. At that point you will cut to the passengers going onto our controllable cabin. We can affect and do everything because obviously at Stansted you can't touch any exterior of a plane or move it or anything like that.
Element number two was the fuselage. We thought originally there'd be a good idea of buying a fuselage, filming that sequence in the fuselage and then tearing it to pieces to reassemble it. However, there was a great company that we found who have a purpose-built, ready-to-go fuselage. We wanted to make it obviously look as dynamic as it possibly could because we were going to be using it during the crash sequence.
We have to sort of simulate the sense of flight and movement. We're doing that by putting lights on cranes, so we see light moving in and out of the window.
I had the sun moving and the cabin static, and that would alternate between what is actually happening inside the aircraft. So if the aircraft is pulling up, the light would go down and you'll see the effect through the cabin. You see the light move over the faces and vice versa. So the other big effect that we use today is the image shaker, which is on the camera, and that is to recreate the actual shake of a cabin.
You may have noticed things are a bit bumpy at the moment. Apologies for that.
You basically create another lens in front of your lens, which then you can shake and rotate electronically, and that plus performance recreates a shaking cabin.
The third element was the cockpit, obviously, and that's where most of the action takes place. That was probably the hardest element. We had to find a cockpit. We looked at building one, but they are obviously very difficult builds, very expensive builds. What we managed to find after an exhaustive search was a company who had a flight simulator cockpit. The next thing that we needed to do was to find images to put in front of it. We went out and filmed with an aerial photographer. He went out and took his plane out over the sea. That gave us the footage that we could then play back on the day rather than having to use green screen and do it all in post, which is obviously a lot more expensive.
They're huge big xenon projectors, and we have another one on a crane which is simulating the sun. So again, we get that sort of movement of light.
One of the most complex elements in the scene was how we would cue off of the visuals, because ordinarily with a flight simulator you pull back on the stick and the outside moves. But because this is being shot with real footage, it was really quite difficult because there were all sorts of things the control columns needed to do that they wouldn't do in reality, being pulled out of one of the pilot's hands, etc. Rather unusually, we would have to fly the sequence real time. It was the only way we could coordinate it.
The result that we found as well is that it was truly scary for the pilots. They were really fighting as the controls were forcing it to go down in the sea. So I think that's why we managed to, above and beyond the fact that we cast some great actors, they managed to get great performances.
On a practical level, there are times when I wish there wasn't a plane because it took so much logistical attention, both in terms of how we realised a plane crash in an interesting, exciting way, and how we absolutely held on to the fact that this isn't just a great big splashy, gratuitous disaster piece. This is about the human impact of killing that many people.